Order?
The line not work, it's not all.
Everybody listen to me? People ignoring me? Is anybody ignoring me? Chair, acting chair speaking. Anyway, need somebody to approve the minutes of September 4th meeting.
So moved.
Second. Motion carried. Okay, we need somebody to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion carried. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Anybody have any conflict of interest of what's going on? Consent agenda, we don't have anything on that. And our next thing would be Sergeant Lori McGee, Family Protection Unit from the St. John Police Force. And Tanya, do you want to introduce her?
Yes, so it's my pleasure to introduce to you Lori McGee. She's the sergeant in charge of the Family Protection Unit, which is really one of our busiest units in the St. John Police Force, and they deal with very serious and complex matters. And Lori's going to give an overview of what she does in the Family Protection Unit as a supervisor and the investigators under her charge. So it's Lori McGee.
Good evening. I had a nice slideshow to present, but I didn't realize there wasn't something set up already, so my apologies in advance for that. I will read from the slides, and I have some additional notes that accompany that, so I'll be brief, but it'll give you a little bit of an overview of what the Family Protection Unit does. As indicated by the inspector, my name is Lori McGee. I'm the supervisor in charge of the Family Protection Unit. There are currently there's supposed to be 4 constables that work in that unit. We're understaffed at the present time by 1 member, which has created a little bit more work for the other 3. But we're hoping to address that hopefully sooner than later. The members work a Monday to Friday shift, so that's an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Basically, I mean, it would be ideal to work a 1 to 9. We deal with a lot of individuals that work a Monday to Friday, and their opportunity to come in to provide a statement obviously would be in the evening hours, but we try and work around that as best we can. The Family Protection Unit's mandate is to provide investigative support in files involving serious domestic assaults, child abuse, and sexual offenses. So we have a number of files that come in either from the Department of Social Development regarding sex offense files involving children. They screen the children, and we assist them with monitoring those statements, and that assists us with our investigation in terms of criminal charges. And we follow up with the offender in each case, in particular when there is a charge that's forthcoming. And we assist the patrol members that they are involved in a file, and the child's a witness to domestic abuse of some sort. Oftentimes the children or child may need to be screened, so we'll often assist the Department of Social Development with that. We also assist the patrol member, because they'll keep the file, but we'll do the screenings for them, and they'll proceed with the charges if that is what's required. Family protection members can also assist if children require screenings, as I just stated, as witnesses in non-family protection offense investigations. We also liaise with the social workers a great deal. There's good collaboration there between us and the Department of Social Development, because they assist us with the investigations in terms of the screening of the children and so on. So. And the Women's Victims of Abuse Protocol, that's something that is in the forefront. Obviously, you probably read a lot about that in the media. It's fairly well talked about. There's our policy, the St. John Police Force policy, Department of Public Safety Women Victim of Abuse protocols that are followed by the members of the police force. The onus is on the police and not the victim to initiate the criminal justice process. In all cases where there's a charge or a charge warranted in circumstances, the police will lay the charge. So what that means is that there's no emphasis on the victim, there's no pressure on the victim to lay that charge or have any sort of pressure put on them to say, oh, I need to lay that charge, or I'm going to, oftentimes if we go to a call patrol and we witness some physical sorts of violence or physical abuse, the female, we often refer sometimes to the 911 call. And the The information is provided to our comm center staff. That's displayed. Basically, our officers are made aware of that. It's supposed to be en route to the call. And if we can develop the grounds to determine that there is enough to arrest that person, we will do that without the cooperation of the victim. And so that's something that's essential. So that's what that means in all cases where there are charges warranted in the circumstances. Police will lay that charge. The emphasis is not on the victim. And there's a lot of things that have been mandated by the province as of late. One of which is the emergency intervention order. That's now in effect, and that's something that not only the police force, but the Hesse House, second stage housing, those folks will assist. And I'm not so much, I don't want to say just victim, but I'll maybe say not a female victim. It's generally female victims, but not always. So when I say female, I'm not just saying that it's only women that are abused, because it is men, but unfortunately we don't hear a lot about that, or maybe they don't come forward as much as what they should. But in any event, it's called the Women's Abuse Protocol, but I would suggest it's a two-way forum there. In any event, one of our constables in the unit is also the domestic intimate partner violence coordinator. That's a position that's fairly complex. It also, they're not only responsible for this, but also the files. So that really impacts the unit, especially when we're short of a person right now. But it's a provincially mandated thing. So we have a checklist, and I brought an example of one of those with me. And basically that checklist is more or less I have left it over there, thank you. So it's a quality assurance that the patrol officers are required to check off, just to ensure that everything's been covered off with domestic violence situations that they've encountered. I'm going to pass it around. Part of that at the bottom you'll notice is the IPB coordinator, the Intimate Partner Violence Coordinator. So that's also an additional bit of work for them. We haven't quite established how we're going to get these forms from the file up to our unit, to have the coordinator review it and go back to the file. So we're kind of working on that right now, but I'll pass it around as something that you can refer to. So on top of that, I've just lost my space here. Just bear with me. Yes. So the newest legislation that was enacted, I think, as of last week, and that we've currently gone into effect with, is domestic violence charges. As such, when patrol deals with something that is where there's a charge, male, female, or there could be same partner. I'm going to get into that in the next slide I have here. Basically, the turnaround used to be court date was given to an accused 10 to 12 weeks down the road, which was quite a lengthy time frame, especially for domestic violence situations such as that, and with a worry that there would be some sort of contact between the two, between the offense date and court date. So primarily the reason for this is we have extra Crown that are on board throughout the province that deal specifically with domestic violence cases. So now we have 7 days. The police has 7 days to have this investigated, statements taken, and presented to our court unit, after which it goes over to off the street there to the Crown Prosecutor's office. They have 13 days to approve that charge, approve that file or not. It's a pre-charge sort of thing. And from the date of the offense, when the person's issued their appearance notice or promise to appear, there's 21-day window. So there's 21 days from the time of the offense until that person appears in court, provided that the charge is approved. So that's a great turnaround. It's fast tracked, which is great for the victims. It's a lot of work for the police, but we just have to do what we can do and get the statements we need and get that going and ensure that, again, the quality control, and that's provided in that form that was sent around, needs to be up to date on that. So that's a good thing that we've brought on board, or the province has. So a person, domestic violence, I guess defined, would be a person who is or was in an intimate personal relationship that use abusive or threatening, harassing, or violent behavior as a means of psychologically, physically, sexually, or financially coercing, dominant, and/or control their partner or former partner. That is what domestic violence is defined as. So there's quite a large. It's not just the physical aspect of hitting somebody. It's the verbal abuse, perhaps, harassment, the mental means psychologically. That's all part of domestic violence. So that's important to recognize as well. And the intimate personal relationship defined would be current or former married relationship, a current and former common law relationship, current and former dating relationship, and includes heterosexual and same-sex relationships. So it's not just male-female. It incorporates a lot of different gender. It's not just gender-specific. There's a lot of things to take into account there. So as I had indicated earlier, one member of our Family Protection Unit is responsible at the DIB coordinator position, and they're tasked with enforcing the provincially mandated criteria for that. So that, like I say, that takes on quite a vast time frame. So growing responsibilities. There are a lot of growing responsibilities with the Family Protection Unit, along with the St. John Police Force, but I guess where it impacts our unit is the investigations are becoming more complex. There's an increasing number of investigations involving social media-based and technology-based platforms. And what I mean by that is we're dealing with a lot of Facebook, social media, Instagram. There's some terms that I'm not even familiar with. I should have been born probably in 1940. I don't have a lot of knowledge on that. I struggled to get the PowerPoint today, folks, so I had assistance from people in my unit for that, so I guess that's why they're there too. So growing responsibilities as well involve schools, going to schools. We spend a lot of time there. I think it lacks maybe education for the children in terms of sharing cell phone images, pornographic images. There's a lot of work involved in those files. Right from because of case law, if a victim wants to turn over their phone to assist us with an investigation, we have to do a warrant, which is something that is just, it's hard to get your head around that, but that requires a lot of time. Those timelines increase the investigation of that file, and it also delays the investigation of other files that are sitting there. So you have to really put your priorities in place. There are a lot of files that each member are carrying right now, but the complexity of the files and the expectations are concerning. And right now we don't have a current member in the Family Protection Unit that's trained to investigate these types of files. So we're struggling in that regard. The training is an issue for that. Internet-based crime is where it is at right now. And it's being seen through patrol. Some of those files come to us, obviously, if it's any sort of a domestic spin to it, with any sort of harassment or threats and that sort of thing. But patrol is seeing it, and really it's how do we handle this? Because primarily that's where policing is going. That's the trend, is internet-based crime. So the investigations falling under our family protection mandates are increasing, and obviously, like I said, the complexity as well. And current court mandated procedures are requiring warrants, and that being referred back to the cell phone issue. And that causes timelines and requirements, investigations to be delayed somewhat. But we plug away and we do what we can do. We have a victim services coordinator that works collaboratively with our unit. They also work with the victims very closely. They keep them up to date with regards to the file. They assist the victim with meetings with the Crown prosecutors in terms of trial preparation. So we want to make sure that everybody's prepared. They have good working knowledge of what's expected, and in terms of when they go to court. And Mary Ellen Martin is her name. She's the coordinator, and she unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, or she would be. And we usually bounce off each other, and it's a little less pressure, but that's okay. She's tied up in another meeting. So basically, she's very valuable to the unit as well as the police force, and she works in collaboration with victim provincial victim services as well. And she'll often refer victims to counseling and that sort of thing. So she's a great asset. We also deal with NSOR. It's a National Sex Offender Registry. We have a number of folks in the community that need to be registered. I do them. I try and alleviate some of the workload from the constables, so that's some of the roles and duties that I perform. I do that once a week, and there could be 4 or 5 a day, depending. And so that's busy. And if they live within our jurisdiction, then it's our responsibility to ensure that they're registered. And with that, our residential checks. Those are sent to us on a monthly basis. Unfortunately, they're not being completed right now. We did have some great assistance from our crime reduction team. There was one member that stepped up and volunteered to do that for us and greatly assisted with that. Unfortunately, the unit was disbanded, brought back in, and the member that did that is out on light duty right now. But I've been speaking with the supervisor, and that's expected to get back on board probably within the next few weeks. I'm not going to say 3 weeks, but maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks. But that is going to happen. That's important that that's done. We just don't have the manpower to do it. And it's such a delicate subject that it's not something that I can just send to patrol and say, these people are on this registry. That's not something, it's delicate enough that it's based out of Fredericton, so it's RCMP. And there are very, very strict guidelines in terms of what's disclosed. So it's not something I'm going to put on a member that they make a mistake and disclose it to somebody, and then they get themselves into trouble for that. It's a very fine line there. So, and breaches of NSORs are sent to my office as well, which means that it's my responsibility or somebody that I've assigned it to ensure that there's a statement taken from perhaps a landlord that's for a person that's moved and hasn't reported it. That would be a breach, so we'd be responsible for that as well. So that can be busy. So, and last but not least, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, the first week of November, and that runs for a month, I think, into the first week of December. And as you know, with money constraints and so on, we don't have any. So what we did last year is we raised enough that we purchased 2 banners. One was a large banner and a smaller banner, and I don't have them with me, but the domestic violence awareness was promoted on that. And one was utilized by members of Simons High School at the Christmas parade, and they wore the purple T-shirts with the domestic violence. So that was one way of getting that out to the community, and not really expensive. The banners didn't cost a lot, so it was good, and it was good PR to do that. And what we did is I had Constable Dwayne Squires, and he collaborated with Harbour Station and the Sea Dogs. And they had a logo on their helmets, and we had them do a video up. They did a video and so on, and that was put on the big what's they call it down there in Harbour Station?
Jumbotron.
Jumbotron, that's it. I knew there was a Tron in there somewhere. Jumbotron, and they also advertised that outside. So that was important, and that got that message out to the community. And I'm just thinking what else we did last year. And that was pretty much it. So this year we're going to reach out to the Harbour Station again to promote that. What we did do, because we had a little bit more money, we have these cards printed. They come in this afternoon, and we're going to have these. And it's basically, it says no excuse for domestic abuse, and the French is on the other side. And we're going to have these put out at the desk. We ordered about 2,000, so we'll have them for years to come. And there's no date on them, so we can utilize those. It's important to get the message out to the public, so we'll have those at the front desk. What we're thinking of doing is putting one of the larger banners out there as well, so that when people from the public come in, they can see that, and it's at the forefront. And hopefully with Harbour Station, we're just in the midst of trying to get that up and running. So we're hoping to have them on board again this year. And the banners, we're going to reach out to Simons High School, see if they'll do that again. One of the auxiliary is actually a teacher there, so that's how we got the in for that. And so he's been great with coordinating that. So that's pretty much it. I don't know if I'm over my time limit of 15 minutes, but that's where we're at with everything. And if anybody has any questions, I'm here to field anything that you have. I'll pass that card
Is there a
on.
mix of civilian and sworn officers in your unit, or just all sworn officers?
Civilian, well, actually, civilian person would be our victim service coordinator.
Okay.
The rest are members.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anybody? Yeah,
That's the question. Well, thanks, great. Thanks for the education and for the work. I have lived experience with your line of work, so thanks for the work you do.
You're welcome.
My question is around, I guess, so you're I no doubt you're busy, your unit's busy and so on. I guess my question I'm trying to formulate it is around gaps in legislation. Is there, and what mechanism exists? If you're seeing something happening over and over again and you see gaps in the legislation, how do we bubble that up from your unit to say somebody needs to go off to Fredericton and lobby government for changes in the legislation itself? Is
Funny
that,
you mentioned that, because I have an example for you.
yeah, perfect.
Our emergency intervention orders that just come into effect, probably, I think it was back in May. We had an issue here just last week on Friday, and as a result of that, I had to contact the chief hearing adjudicator, because it come to my attention that the victim who had provided information for this emergency intervention order to be issued had lied in the information that she provided. And she's since come forward and indicated that she did lie about it. So I called the adjudicator to ask what they were prepared to do about that, because that is serious. That takes away somebody's livelihood. If we go into somebody's home and remove a man or take his vehicle, or there's things he needed, that's a huge issue. So I called this man and I had a conversation with him, and he indicated that there was nothing he could do. There was nothing he could do about it because it had already been filed. And it was up to the person, we'll call him the respondent, to go to over, no, it was up to the person, the respondent. The applicant is a person who calls and indicates that there's been an issue, that they've been assaulted, or they've been mentally, some sort of coercion, or they've been psychologically or mentally abused. So in this case, it was an assault. They call, and basically they recanted on what they said. There has to be some sort of consequence for that. Unfortunately, through the criminal aspect of things, we couldn't proceed because it was a statement that wasn't taken, or that it was taken, but it wasn't something the Crown would go with because of the type of statement. But I feel that there should be something legislated, that there should be some consequence to that. And I thought when I called the chief adjudicator that I would receive an answer a little bit more than what I did in terms of what's the consequence here. Somebody just can't come in and provide information to the emergency adjudicator, who has 24 hours to review it and then issue it. And then it comes to the police force. And we have to go at 10 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning and remove somebody from their home, typically. That's not always, but that in some cases that's what happens. So when we're taking away the livelihood of somebody, the St. John Police Force members are going there and doing this based on this information. And we have to do it. We're mandated to do it. So when somebody lies about it, that's a huge issue. So I would like to know what provisions are in place. So there's something that needs to be followed up on. I plan on going to the next step in terms, I called him, I didn't get what I needed for an answer. So I'm hoping through our management team that we can look at this and say, okay, I can't do it. I don't have the authority to do it, but I'm hoping somebody higher up does, or it has to be legislated through government to do something about that. That's no way that should happen.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody got any other questions? Like to thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That part?
Okay.
Thank you for the presentation.
You're very welcome. Thanks.
Receive and file.
Second.
Motion passed. Okay, under committee reports,
What number?
number 7,
Number
sorry.
7, thank you, Brian.
Sorry, it's not, those won't go.
Oh,
Oh, you're
What's the matter?
Is it 2.7, isn't it?
really?
there is now.
No, there isn't any,
So
number 7, there isn't any.
Just into the nines, right?
Yeah, and there's nothing for 8, so we'll go right into 9.1, internal monthly report.
Questions for me?
Chief?
So for August, there's 0 complaints, 4 complimentary correspondence, and 0 grievances. Recommendation received and filed.
Motion.
Second.
Second. Any questions? Motion passed. Okay, 9.2, overtime and court time expense.
Unless there's any questions.
We didn't have those 2 reports.
Pardon me?
We didn't have those 2 reports.
The overtime and the 9.2 and 9.3? We didn't, okay. Okay, 9.4? Nothing on 9.4?
9.4 is that.
9.4 is the highlights.
Okay. Well, I guess we need a motion to adjourn.
No,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
9.4.
Well, I thought you said we didn't have anything
No,
on
just
it.
a quick question on 9.4. Chief, are there any, again, I really like this dashboard. Are there any
9.4, you
sort of bumps in activity on one particular metric that seem different than you expect?
Well,
Okay.
I have to apologize because we
Oh,
got my
there's a
kit
dashboard.
today. That's not included.
Okay, there we go.
So, no, I think it gives you a good overview. There's nothing that we see that's probably any different. There's abnormal, anything that's a blip on the screen or anything that's abnormal from what we normally see. It's some of these issues go around where our manpower is available, and if we do resources or special jobs, these things may change a little bit, but no, it's pretty well status quo.
Interesting, so for example, Chief, the calls for service year-to-date, 38,248. It'd be interesting to have a further breakdown of, like, that, I don't think that's tied here. So you've got 38,000 calls. Be interesting sometime, maybe one of the future presentations on how do those calls break down. Like, not all calls, I assume, are created equally.
Correct.
You've got some that would be considered high priority, sort of very serious, and some that I would assume would be considered fairly nuisance type related calls. It would just be interesting. So, for example, I bring it up. We had a growth committee meeting today, and we had a discussion around bylaws and bylaw enforcement. We're trying to fill a unsightly premises position, and I said, well, I'd like to have a bigger conversation about all of the bylaw enforcement that we do between police, bylaw folks at City Hall, and is there an opportunity to take a look at that and have a bigger conversation, right?
Right.
So just I guess within that data sometimes can spark other conversations and other opportunities to maybe take some of that off your plate if
Yes.
that's
So in fact, I think when I first met with the Council and members of the Commission, there is an actual breakdown of a lot of those calls. It's not all perfectly fine, define rep, but it gives you a good idea. So we can bring that back for a next meeting.
Yeah, and just one last comment, thank you. One last comment, it's sort of again the same comment we had today about, it's just that constant conversation. I know it's not that black and white, okay, so I'm not suggesting it is, but what are we doing, and what, is there anything we can stop doing? And can we put it back in, either A, stop it, or B, put it into someone else's category, give it back to another jurisdiction or another government agency that has very nicely put it in your lap, but maybe it belongs back in someone else's lap. So that's what I find when you drill into that data. You can sometimes find little opportunities to refocus the conversation. Yeah.
Being core services that you referenced.
Well, the first is not core.
Okay, we have a motion to receive and file.
Move.
So moved. Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn.
No one wants to go.
Seconded. Great. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.